And this is why I know that I mess with you, Emily, because even though we don't know each other that well, you still can understand that two things can be true at the same time. I don't like the choices that Huda made because obviously it was destructive. It really showed her traumas and made it worse from what she was saying. But at the same time, when does accountability come into play? Because even in forensic psychology, somebody can do something, and obviously this is a different aspect, but just think about it in a psychology aspect. If somebody does something in the way that she did with manipulation, when do we get to that point of being like, okay, well, I understand that they have trauma, but when do we stop letting people project it onto others without having a consequence? Now, whether this consequence is actually do something about it lawfully, if it gets to that point, which obviously this is just out of context, this is an example so I can tie in forensic psychology, or if it's the consequences of her and Alandria and Shelly not being friends anymore, like that still sucks, and they're also getting a lot of hate from everything. But it's definitely true that two things can be true at once. I don't like the behavior that she chose to have, but at the same time, that doesn't make her a bad person. And in my other video, when I was saying, like, if you really thought that you weren't being a bad person at the villa, then you wouldn't have got out thinking that everyone's gonna hate you. Saying that in that context, I could have changed a word on that, so I just want to make sure before anybody goes back and watches that, I don't think that she's a bad person. I think she makes bad decisions, and she was leading with an emotional front. So obviously, she has some emotional insecurities that she hasn't worked on before getting on a TV show. This isn't a video to sit here and break down and be like, you know what, screw her. It's just the accountability factor of her still taking the scenarios that Alex was talking to her about. To explain yourself is one thing, but it's a whole nother thing to contradict it. So like her saying, well, yeah, I said that stuff about Amaya, but like there is no but. When you actually take accountability, you have to take accountability for what you said about that person, how they felt, because you can't help, once it's out of your mouth, you can't help how a person reacts or how they feel about something. But the emotional maturity just was not there. This can go into a different slew of aspects, right? And different people are going to relate to Huda, different people are going to relate to me, and whether that's because I'm vocal about it or because we're clocking the red flags and whatnot, or people are with Huda because they see themselves in her, or because they feel as though she's the epitome of like a girl's girl, or whatever you relate to. Everyone has a right to their own feelings. Everyone has a right to live in their own reality for what they gather from somebody else and what they look at them for. So when I was saying in my other video, like, I'm not surprised she has a bunch of followers, majority of people, it's just a known thing. Like if you've been in society and you've talked to people and you've had issues with people, you can see that a majority of people would rather not take accountability for something or blame it and flip it. Like, I did this, but it was because of blah, blah, blah. No, that's not how accountability works. So I do have grace for her. Absolutely. I would be a hypocrite because I've also been abused and other people have been abused and have gone through things. But at the same time, even with my own personal story, I have lashed out at people. I have cussed people out. I've done a lot of things because of the PTSD that I suffered from that abuse. But that does not make it right. If those people that I talked to never wanted to talk to me again in my life because of the way I spoke to them, I can't, no matter what, no matter how much that I have forgiven myself and I've forgiven the situation and whatever, I can't be mad at a person for reacting the way that they did and creating this narrative that I'm a bad person because of the way I treated them. Just because I went through trauma does not mean that I'm allowed to project that onto somebody else. So I do have sympathy for her, but at what point do we stop and say, okay, like, girl, I hear you, I totally understand, but the way that you acted, regardless, there's no ifs, ands, or buts, was inappropriate. That's the whole point of accountability. Like, Shelly, Alandria, and Huda don't ever have to talk to each other again. That's fine. Like, honestly, there's no reason why the girls should feel like they have to talk to Huda if they don't want to. It's their own personal lives, it's their own choice, their own feelings, and Huda never has to talk to them again. Cool. But the whole fact of the matter is that you're blaming your reactions and laughing about it for how you treated other people on your trauma. And everybody has trauma. Does not mean that you're allowed to project that onto somebody else. And to tie it into forensic psychology, if somebody goes out into public and assaults somebody because they're super mad, thank you so much. Thank you. Pause. Okay, I got this sauce. I forgot what it was called. And this one, I also forgot what it was called. But I had the cashier choose what her favorite breakfast was, and then I got it because sometimes I get tired of picking my own stuff. And I like to explore and see what other people like and kind of see how their taste buds are. Okay, let me try this really first before I keep talking. Oh my God. That's some good stuff right there. But anyway, so if somebody goes out in town and let's say they get into a physical altercation with someone because that's what they're used to and they were brought up around it, and that's just what they think is okay to do. The emotion of anger being tied to physical assault, obviously that correlates, right? And the way that she was acting with some of her traumas, it correlates. Like, you can read between a book and see what's going on before she even said really what her traumas were. You can kind of get a grasp on it. But if everybody went out nilly-willy and was like, well, I'm doing this because of my trauma, and not taking that accountability factor of realizing, okay, I need to learn how to control myself even when I'm triggered, I mean, how would the world look? And I'm glad that she was on Call Her Daddy saying, like, I understand I have these triggers, blah, 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 blah. She's recognizing that, so now she has no excuse. I would just want to put that out into society, because every time that you have like a bad reaction to something because of your trauma, the second that you become cognizant of that is the second that there's no excuse anymore. I'll die on that hill. The second that you become cognizant of your trauma is the second that it's not an excuse anymore. Because I understand when people act out on something and it's their subconscious running their brain because their emotions taking over the situation, but drawing back and recognizing that, like, she has no excuse anymore. So from here on out, like, even, I'm sure the reunion's gonna be messy, but from here on out, like, no, you should not be acting like that. And if you are, you're making a conscious decision to continue the patterns that you've already had. It takes more than 3 days to change, I'll say that. This is the last time I'm going to talk about it, though. I don't want people to think that I'm just trying to beat a dead horse, but it is serious, because there's a lot of girls seeing this stuff. There's probably girls in high school or younger that are looking at that behavior and seeing how many supporters she's having towards it and thinking, okay, this is something that's okay to do, when it's not. Male, female, it doesn't matter if it was a man doing what she did or another woman doing what she did. The behavior itself is not good. It's not good. Doesn't make her a bad person, but from here on out, she has no excuse. I'll say it again. From here on out, she has no excuse. You can have sympathy all you want at the end of the day, because I sympathize with some of her stuff. I literally had to come home because of abuse that I went through, and I just crashed out. I get it. Like, I would be a hypocrite if I didn't understand what the effects of what trauma can do to a person. I'm living proof of it. However, I'm also living proof of coming out on the other side and understanding that I need to point the finger at myself for how I react, because that's not anyone else's problem of what happened to me. It sucks, but it's the truth, the straight up truth. I hope that made sense, but not to be blunt or anything, but at the same time, like, that's who I am. I am going to be blunt. I don't know, but have a good day.